Hi everybody, Gregg Hoffmna here, co-owner of Urban Pump Personal Training Studio with my lovely wife Sharon. She's the one that's managing the camera from behind the scenes. This is our gym, as you can see. Small but very effective. What I like about it is because of its size, we're able to move around quickly between the sets so we can keep the heart rate up. It's very difficult to do that in a big gym. I have an online client, as a matter of fact, we discussed that today. She's really having a challenge with that. So it's nice to have a small gym. But anyway, this is our gym. Welcome. So today's topic is going to be about how to make exercise efficient. And I really think it's important that we do that simply because we have a life, so many things that need to get done in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, that if you're spending several hours a week in the gym trying to get some kind of modicum of fitness going on, you sacrifice other areas of your life. What's interesting is that you do not need to spend a lot of time in the gym to make it effective. What matters is making what you do count. If you do that, then you don't need to do a whole lot of exercise. In essence, that's what this talk is going to be about. How to make exercise efficient so that when you're in the gym, you can hit it, get it done, get out, and get on with your life. So anyway, efficient exercise would have these various components to it. First of all, it's a great way to build muscle. You can lose fat and you can reshape the body all at the same time. And you'll improve your reserve capacity. Now what I mean by that is just simply daily activities will get a whole lot easier just because you're going to have a higher level of fitness, higher level of strength and endurance that you would otherwise have, so that what would tire you out during the course of the day simply wouldn't be a problem anymore. It's also a great way to improve your sports performance. And truth be told, it can be done with as little as 40 minutes a week. 2 20-minute workouts a week can produce remarkable results. And I know this because I've done it for 30 years. I've researched it. I put in what worked, took out what didn't, and streamlined the whole program. That's what we'll talk about today. But that's in essence exercise made efficient and what can be done with it. Okay, there are 3 valuable components to a good exercise program, in my opinion. First one is strength training. Now I'm going to spend most of the time talking about that, so I'll save that for last. The other things that I feel are very important to put into a good exercise program are core and stability training and functional training. So if you combine all 3 of those and you can do it in a short amount of time, you have a very effective, very efficient workout and a highly functioning body. So let's talk about them. I'll start with strength training. In my opinion, if there's one form of exercise that's a true fountain of youth, strength training is it. Nothing comes close. You could do Pilates, you could do cardio, you could do yoga, any kind of endurance activity, but in my opinion, they just aren't as effective as a good strength training program. As I get older, the more sure I am of that statement. And here's the reason why. We simply lose muscle mass as we get older. As a matter of fact, we start losing muscle mass from age 35 on up through the rest of our lives. That's known as sarcopenia. In my opinion, it actually starts happening sooner. I'm willing to bet that it'll go back all the way to when we get in our early 20s and early 30s, we start losing muscle mass. And the reason why I say that is because once we go through our growth spurt, through our teens and early 20s, and we stop that, then we start losing muscle. Even if we're active, we're going to start losing that muscle because if the body doesn't need it, it's going to lose it. Gets worse as we get older. When we get in our late 30s and early 40s, it starts accelerating, and research shows that on average we can lose about a half a pound of muscle a year from age, they're speculating from 40 to 45 on up through the rest of our lives. Like I said, I think it starts happening sooner, but a half a pound of muscle a year from age 70 or 40 on up through the rest of our lives, if you think about it, that's quite a bit. Let's say you go out 20 years. You're going to lose about 10 pounds of muscle that you built when you were younger. This is known as sarcopenia, and once that's gone, it doesn't come back. You really need to maintain it. So anyway, I'm a big fan of strength training. I think that should be first and foremost in an exercise program. Once again, I'm going to spend more time talking about that in a second because it can be done very efficiently. Don't need to spend a lot of time in the gym. Actually, I'm going to talk about it now, according to my lecture. So let me talk about it a little bit now. First of all, you only need 1 set per body part to get the job done. You see a lot of guys in the gym, they're doing anywhere from 10 to 20 sets per body part. They're doing many different exercises for that one body part. as an example, if somebody comes in and does their chest routine for the day, I used to do this, and it's very common, but let's say somebody's coming in for their chest routine that day. They're going to do something like 4 or 5 sets of bench press. Then after they get done with the bench press, they're going to do incline dumbbell presses, and then they may do some decline dumbbell presses. And then on top of that, they'll do 3 or 4 sets of cable flies, and they do that to shape the muscle, whatever that means. But at the end of the day, they're spending about 45 minutes to an hour doing 15 to 20 sets just for the chest alone. Then they'll finish up with maybe 4 or 5 sets of triceps. But that's one muscle group for one day. You can get done in one set what takes somebody like that 15 or 20 sets to do if you know what you're doing. And I always say this, if you can get done in one set what takes people 10 sets to do, why do the 10 sets? Why not just do the one set, get it done, get out of the gym, and move on? How can that happen? Well, first of all, you need to understand the difference between fast twitch and slow twitch fibers to make that happen. Slow twitch fibers produce low levels of force they do for the great lengths of time. They're the endurance fibers. They're the ones that we call on when we do long distance activities like biking, cycling, walking, jogging, whatever the case may be. Low intensity activity for long periods of time. That works the slow twitch fibers. Fast twitch fibers, on the other hand, produce large amounts of force. They do it in a short amount of time, and then they just kind of burn out. As a matter of fact, it's incredibly demanding on the body to recruit the fast twitch fibers. So the body really doesn't want to if it doesn't have to. But here's the thing that you need to understand. You can train the slow twitch fibers all you want. You can train them, you could spend several hours a week training the slow twitch fibers, but you're really not going to see much change in the body. If you want to see more tone, more definition, more shape, more strength, more injury prevention capability, and higher reserve capacity, you have to train those fast twitch fibers. They have to get stronger. Now, when it comes to the whole process of sarcopenia, this is important to understand. When we start losing muscle mass, we don't lose the slow twitch fibers, we lose the fast twitch fibers. Once again, they're the ones that give a lot of high reserve capacity, injury prevention, all the high functioning capabilities of the body. And research shows that once they're gone, they're gone. There comes a point where you can't get them back again. So once again, in my opinion, we have to train those fast twitch fibers. Not so much the slow twitch fibers. We use them a lot. We need to focus on building and maintaining those fast twitch fibers. So you simply have to work hard enough to do it. The load has to be heavy enough, and you need to do smooth and controlled repetition so that you have continuous tension throughout the set. And the more of a burning sensation you're getting in the muscle, understand this, the more you're recruiting those fast twitch fibers. So you really want to have the set, the load adjusted right, and smooth and continuous tension, and make that set count. Smooth and controlled repetitions, and the load needs to be heavy enough to where you can reach momentary muscular failure or a deep level of fatigue between 8 to 12 repetitions. If you're looking at time under tension, that set should last anywhere from 45 to 60 seconds, 45 to 70 seconds, somewhere in that range, and the muscle has to be working darn hard. If you're doing that, you're getting those fast twitch fibers, you're telling the body, hey, we need to maintain that. Let's not lose the fast twitch fibers, and you're going to do it. You're going to maintain a high level of physical fitness by doing so. All right, another thing that I think is important is functional exercise. In the fitness industry, functional exercise came into vogue probably about 17 to 20 years ago, somewhere in that range. And what the fitness industry did, they kind of stole the concept, the idea of functional exercise from physical therapists. Let me explain. Physical therapists, when they get a client that they work with that have an injured body part, for example, a lot of what they do in the beginning sessions is they do very lightweight, high repetition micro movements to try to get whatever muscle that's atrophied from the injury to get back to some modicum of strength and stability. Now once they do that, then they start doing functional movement patterns, what they call functional movement patterns, where they'll have that body part do a fuller range of motion and integrate more with the other body parts and become a bit more functional. They call that functional exercise, functional training. The fitness world kind of stole the idea and, well, they bastardized it. Their idea is this. If you talk to a trainer and ask them to put together a functional exercise program for you, as an example, they'll ask you, well, what do you do for a living? And let's say that you work at UPS. I like using this example a lot when I talk to new prospects. But let's say you work at UPS and a big part of your job is lifting boxes, doing some rotation, putting the boxes up on a shelf. You tell the trainer that, and then what the trainer is going to do is in the gym design an exercise program that mimics that motion with heavier and heavier loads. They're thinking that's what's making the body a bit more functional. And it kind of makes sense, but I disagree with that for a training protocol, because when you think about it, if you're doing that all day long, the last thing you need is more of it in the gym. You're doing that same motion over and over again, same movement pattern. What you're going to create is a lot of overuse injuries. You're going to see a lot of problems with arthritis, tendonitis, some muscles getting weaker, other muscles getting stronger and further exacerbating that problem. All those things lead to a lot of chronic pain that just isn't corrected by doing more functional patterns in the gym that mimics what you do in real life. A lot of trainers do that, particularly when it comes to sports, and that's another topic in and of itself. But I do think functional exercise is important. However, I define it a little bit differently. My idea of functional exercise is doing general whole body movements under load in a 3D environment that teach the body to work as a unit. It needs to be general because we don't want to further exacerbate any overuse injuries somebody may be developing. But it also has to teach the body to work in the 3D environment. And the reason why I feel that's important is because a lot of times when we do strength training, for example, we tend to isolate the body parts. For example, when we work the legs, we'll do something like leg presses or barbell squats. When we work the upper back, we're going to do a pull down or a seated row. When we do chest work, we're going to do a dumbbell press, we're going to do a cable press. Things along those lines. They isolate the body parts and really focus on that one body part, which is good. That's how you develop strength in that body part. But you're not teaching the chest, for example, to work with the core, to work with the legs, and do force production, a synergistic force production capability in a 3D environment. And so it's kind of a missing piece. And when I first started experimenting with adding functional movement patterns to our exercise program, I kind of wondered if I wanted to add it, if I felt there was any real value to it. But that question got answered when I did work with a couple of guys that would come in, and they were already strong when I started working with them, but when I had them do some functional exercise, they were all over the place. They really didn't have very good coordination. They didn't have proprioception, which is body awareness in relation to space. There was a missing piece to the element of a whole functional fitness routine, them being fit in real life. That was a missing piece. So I feel that functional exercise bridges that gap, and it also helps get the body to work above that anaerobic threshold, which goes a long way towards improving that reserve capacity. So I feel it's very important to do functional exercise, and that's how you integrate it. Okay, another thing that I feel is very important to put in a good exercise program is core and stability training. I'll start off with core training. When I first got into the industry 30 years ago, our idea of training the core is working the rectus abdominis. Six-pack abs, so you do a lot of crunches, a lot of leg lifts, that kind of thing. Well, what we didn't know is that we were teaching the nervous system to recruit the rectus abdominis to stabilize the core, which isn't a good thing to do because the rectus abdominis, first of all, is only one muscle of the core, and it's too far away from the back to give it any meaningful support when it's engaged. There are four muscles really you need to be aware of when it comes to training to the core. One is the rectus abdominis, but you also have the internal and external obliques. Those are the ones that are important for torsional rotation. But the big one that was neglected, we didn't really even know about it in the industry when I first got involved in the industry, but it's known as the transverse abdominis, and that's actually kind of like the deep muscle of the core, and it acts as the girdle of the core. When it's engaged, it will literally decompress the spine when you're under load. It's the muscle that we want to teach to be recruited right away on an unconscious level whenever we get ready to do any activity we do. So in other words, if you want to shovel the sidewalk or do barbell squats or anything like that, that transverse abdominis needs to be engaged to protect the back. I know bodybuilders back in the day, they did a lot of training of the rectus abdominis. Didn't do a whole lot for the transverse abdominis. They'd go out and shovel a sidewalk, for example, and throw their backs out and wonder why. Well, it's a big part of the reason they didn't train the transverse abdominis. So, in my opinion, when you want to train the core, you want to train in two ways. One in a stabilizing sense and the other is in a functional sense. In a stabilizing sense, we want to get that transverse abdominis to fire, to engage, and make it the primary muscle to be called on before we do anything. Then the other muscles come around to support it as more force or more stability is needed. So that's training the core in a stabilizing sense. It's also important to work the core in a functional sense too. So doing crunches and leg lifts, that's important too. So along with torsional rotation stuff, all that does a complete working of the core. It's just that we want to have a balance between training the core in a functional sense and training it in a stabilizing sense, and making that a big piece of what we do. So, for example, we'll have people do a lot of things on a fit ball. Arc on the ball, hip flexion on the ball, funky things like that. And it looks like, well, what's this all about? Well, that's to teach the core to work in a stabilizing sense, get that transverse abdominis to fire, and have it be part of an overall program for the core working in a functional sense. So anyway, that's core training. Now, stability training is another thing that I think is very important to do too. What I mean by stability training is simply working in an unstable environment and making the stabilizing muscles work harder than they otherwise would. A good example is doing something standing on one foot. So let's say I'll have somebody stand on one foot holding weight, and maybe have them do a mini squat and a mini raise, or mini squat and a front raise. Doesn't look like it'd be all that hard to do, and it really isn't, but the fact that you're doing it on one foot and not both feet at the same time creates an unstable environment. So the stabilizing muscles, in this case the abductors, adductors, hip external rotators, all the muscles around the hips and knees, along with the ankle, have to work much, much harder to keep you stable while you do that lift. They're getting the stimulus to get stronger in relation to the prime movers. So as an example, when you do a leg press, quads, glutes, and hams, they're the prime movers of the legs. They're working very hard to get strong, but not so much the abductors, adductors, hip external rotators and such. But when you do something standing on one foot, they do get involved to a higher degree. And once again, it goes a long way towards working on balance and proprioception, body awareness. So it's good to add stabilizing type exercises in the program too. We recommend that. Really only need a couple exercises per routine to really bring that into the forefront and have the stabilizing muscles gain strength commensurate to the larger muscle groups. Another thing that's very important to do with a good exercise program, and if you do this well, you don't need much exercise at all, but that's simply training above the anaerobic threshold. What do I mean by that? I mean by training as hard as you can to where it's very difficult to breathe, but try to keep doing exercise beyond that as best as you can possibly stand. By doing so, you're training the body to work above that anaerobic threshold and to perform for longer periods of times above that anaerobic threshold. And it also makes that anaerobic threshold peak a little bit higher. So in other words, you can handle heavier workloads for longer periods of time. Daily activities get a whole lot easier because you really increase that anaerobic threshold. So as an example, when I train clients into my own workout, let me use my workout as an example. What I try to do is on my first 3 or 4 exercises, I'll take the sets as deep into fatigue as I can possibly handle, really ramps my heart rate up, gets my breathing really high. What I try to do is rest just long enough to where I know I could do another hard set, but I don't let my heart rate get back down to baseline. What I mean by baseline is get back down to between 80 to 110 beats a minute. I'd like to keep it around 130 to 140 beats a minute and then go and do another hard set, so I keep that heart rate elevated. And by doing so, I'm challenging those systems, lactic acid buffering systems, for example, and a lot of these other systems that really have to perform above that anaerobic threshold, get them to work better and to train them to do a good job. By doing so, once again, daily activities get easier. I can handle heavier workloads for longer periods of time. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about training above the anaerobic threshold. Keep the rest intervals brief. Train as hard as you can. Don't let the heart rate get back to baseline. And an interesting thing about it is it also helps improve the blood profile. And there's been some research showing that it's very good for anti-aging, slowing down the aging process when you develop these systems. So anyway, some final points, and then I'll wrap it up. 10 to 12, 10 to 13 sets per workout is really all you need. You could train the whole body doing 1 set per body part. And even as you get stronger, you may need overall less exercise. I have some people that will only do 10 sets per routine. That's all they need. The workout should last no more than 30 minutes. 20 minutes for most people seem to do a good job. My workouts are 20 to 25 minutes on average, I would say. And once again, you only need 2 workouts a week to really get the job done. Allow enough time to recover to be able to do another hard workout. But in the meantime, your body is going to adapt to this. It's going to get stronger. It's going to burn body fat a little bit better. It's going to build more muscle. You're going to see reshaping of the body. You're going to improve your ability to prevent injuries through daily activity, or even if you get in an accident. Look, here's a good example. Sharon and I ran into a deer on a motorcycle a couple of years back. We actually survived that quite well, and that had a lot to do with the fact that we built up so much muscle around our joints and connective tissues that there was a lot of support to be able to handle that impact. I'm very grateful we do this. But anyway, I think strength training goes a long way towards injury prevention along those lines. And once again, a workout once every 3 or 4 days gets the job done. That's it. Thank you very much.